Hi, everyone. I'm Angela Burnley from Burnley and Trowbridge. I'm glad to see you here today because we're going to be doing a simple and fun project. We're going to be making 18th century work bags. Now, if you don't know about 18th century work bags, they were a little bag that ranged from simple to very elegant. We found ones in collections that were simple linen all the way up to highly embroidered with spangles and silk and ribbons. They made them in all varieties, but it was a homemade item. It was not something you typically bought. You made it in the home. It was used for keeping your needlework or small sewing projects or perhaps knotting, which is a whole nother subject. Today, we're going to make them so that you can use them, as I said before, for your sewing projects, or you can turn them into an eco-friendly gift bag. So I'm basing our bag on an original that's owned by Colonial Williamsburg. The one that's owned by them, we have a link for you, is very elegant. It's embroidered, it has silk ribbon, it has metal tassels. We're going to do a simpler version, no embroidery today, but we are going to duplicate what we saw in the original. So for our project today, we're going to be use some of our pretty apple green Padua soy, and we're going to be using this pretty pink taffeta for the lining. These colors were super popular in the 18th century, so we think this is going to look fabulous, don't you? So my finished project is going to measure 10 inches wide by 8.5 inches tall. You can choose to size it up or down, but we're making ours the same size as the original. The original used the folded edge to make up one side of the bag, so I'm going to do the same. To figure out my pattern, I'm going to take my finished dimensions times 2 and add a 1/2 inch seam allowance on the stitch side and the bottom. For the drawstring casing, I'll add the 1/2 inch seam allowance plus a 3/4 inch for the actual casing. So here's our pattern. We're going to be cutting 2 pieces that will overall measure inches wide by 9 3/4 inches high. So let's start cutting. So the first measurement I want to take is I've got a nice big piece here. My first measurement I'm going to take is my inches. So I'll get a pin here. I'm going to use my selvage edge that makes it easy. All right, and I'll pin that to mark it. And then I'm going to do 9 3/4 inches. Get another pin here. And here we go. So measure down here again. So we've got a square. Although with silk, you can tear it as long as you don't mind silk guts, because it does make a mess. So I've got that marked. So I am going to do this. I'm going to tear it. Such a satisfying sound. All right. And since this is a Padua soy, I'm not sure that I can tear it cross grain. So I am going to cut this part. If you're not sure, you can go, I can sometimes do things by eye, but if you're not feeling confident, go ahead and measure it. Put a pin in again. You've already got your clip mark, and go for it. Okay. Now we're going to do that again with our pink. So we're going to lay the green, make it easy on ourselves. Get our pink lining out here. I have quite a bit. So I'll have plenty for other projects, right? Let's see. Put this in here. Get that fabric out of my way. I'll pin this in place to get my marks. Stick a couple of pins in here. Lost my pin cushion. All the bent pins. Don't you guys find that, like, it's always the bent pins you pick up? I know I do. All right. Now we're ready to cut our lining. It's a little bit wedgy. And we're going to tear again. All right. I have my 2 pieces. So let's get all this out of the way and we will start sewing. This project is so simple and satisfying. You're only going to be using 1 stitch. You're going to be using a felling stitch, and it is easy and cathartic, and I love it. So the first thing you're going to want to do is turn and get a seam allowance. So we figured about a 1/2 inch. I'm doing this with my finger now. If you've got a bone presser, that works really well. Or get out your iron and iron it. When we sew, I'll show you how to do the corners too, a nice, neat way. Okay, we have all 4 sides pressed off so that we've got our seam allowance. We're going to do the same thing with our lining, and then we'll start stitching. So you notice in the corners that I folded like so. I'm going to do the opposite when I fold my lining because I'm going to show you a neat trick that makes for a very pretty corner. When I get to the lining, I'm going to fold it my short end and then my long end. So the short end is folded in instead of out. When you put this all together, you'll get a beautiful little corner like so. So we have it fully pinned now, and we've done a neat little thing with our corners, which I showed you in a close-up. So we're going to start stitching. We're going to be using a felling stitch for this. I am using some of our sewing silk. I'm actually using just the, I think this is our oyster. And I know a lot of people talk about, you know, wanting to match. Well, you find that they didn't always match the threads in the 18th century. And this is a good example of this. Our oyster color seems to blend with a lot of different colors when it comes to silk. So I'm going to start so I can show you how these corners are going to work. So we're going to start here and bury my knot. And then we're going to take just small felling stitches. Now, the trick with this is you do not want to catch the outer layer. And I'm going to put my glasses on because, hello, I can't see what I'm doing. Much better. Look, there's thread there. You want to do little stitches, and you want to only catch the turn back portion of your seam. Normally, we show you, like in the filling, that you're going to see little stitches along here. You might see some occasionally, but you're not going to see them regularly. You want to try and avoid that in this particular case. So as we go, take those pins out. So again, you want to do teeny tiny stitches. Catch only the inner layer to the best of your ability. I just felt one go all the way through. That's okay. So occasionally you might find that you have an issue with your silk thread twisting and knotting on you. If you're doing a lot of stitching with silk, it's a good idea to occasionally take it, turn it upside down, and let it untwirl. This will take all the little kinks that you've created in the silk out, and you'll have less problems with it knotting. So we're getting close to our corner, and you can see here that I've folded it in. You can see it like so. You're going to get it up as close as you can to that edge, but still keep it tucked. We're going to turn our corner. Now here I haven't quite made the best corner here. I'm a little dissatisfied with that. But, you know, it happens. So I'm going to go ahead and fill it down. It'll get hidden in the bag. So and we're going to continue to stitch all the way around the entire piece. Same way. All right, so we have now filled down our lining on all 4 sides. This makes it a nice, clean interior. And the next step is a step that we have to take before we put in our casing. The original had 2 drawstrings made of ribbon, and we're going to do the same thing. So we're going to start by folding in half. Marking with a pin. So we've got our center point. There you go. And we're going to slit this just a little bit. Now I don't have my measuring tape, so I'm going to guess somewhere in the neighborhood of about 1.5 inches. Maybe a little bit more. Because we've got to come down, let's see, we've got to get our 3/4 and our 3/4. So actually it's going to be more than that. Sorry. So once I've put in my casing, then I'll have a little bit extra. Now I've put my slit in. Before we can go forward and do our casing, we're going to have to finish this edge. So my suggestion is you can do a couple of things. You can roll it like so and whip it, or you can just turn it right side to right side and whip it that way. So we're going to do that for, I think that's what we're going to do. So we've cut our slit, we've turned all the edges in, and we are going to just whip this closed. You might want to do a little bit of a bar tack or some reinforcement down here in the bottom. I want to take a moment right now to say why this is a little widgy and ways that you can change it. This is based on the original, and the width is approximately the width that a silk would have been in the 18th century. So chances are when these were made, they were made to conserve the silk. So this would have been a selvage edge, and this would have been a selvage edge, and they would have butted those selvage edges together. In this case, we're working with modern silk, so we have more raw edges. Also, another way that you can cheat on this, we're doing it like the original, but you can also fold it like so and turn it this way so that you're seaming up to this point and then creating your casing at the top. That means you don't have to do this part, which I'm getting ready to do right now. So I'm getting down to the end of this. All we've done is a little whip stitch to close off the raw edge, tuck it in and close it off. The next thing that we will do will be the casing. I'm being very stingy with my thread. I'm down to the last little bit and I refuse to put a new piece of thread in my needle. I'm going to make it last, even though it doesn't want to cooperate. It's starting to get naughty, but we're going to make it work. Going to make it work. Okay, we're getting down to the last couple of stitches. All right. So I've got my little opening and I'm ready to put my casing in. So remember I said the original was 3/4. So that's about 3/4. Works for me. So I'm going to pin that in place and then I'm going to do a hem stitch and finish off my casing. All right, and I'll do the same on the other side and then we'll get to whipping. So I've got it all pinned in place and the next thing I'm going to do is whip the edge down to make my casing. Remember, you only want to catch your lining. Don't go through to your fashion fabric if you can help it. So I have now finished my casing. I've folded it over. I'm going to pin it to the outside. I know this is unusual, but we are going to be doing a on this particular bag because that's what the original was sewn with. So I'm going to start just a little bit down from where the casing finishes so that it matches up with the other side. Start by burying my knot. You're basically doing a very tiny whip stitch and you're doing it very close to the edge. You're literally just catching the edges. Making the stitches tight together. You want to have a teeny tiny little whip stitch. So now that you've stitched your seams along the side and the bottom, you have a completed bag. So the last thing that we're going to do is run either a cording or a ribbon through our casing. The original had a ribbon running through it on both sides so that it could be pulled closed. It also had a little knot or ribbon knot at the bottom along with some tasseling that was made of silk thread and metal thread. We're going to just do a simple ribbon tie, but we're going to put a little knot at the end of it just to make it pretty. I've chosen our soft pink taffeta ribbon. It's a 1 1/4 inches wide, and I think it coordinates really nicely with our lining. So I've chosen 2 yards. That should give me plenty to do what I want to do. First thing I am going to do is I'm going to cut it in half. I guess I don't need my thimble anymore. All right. Get your trusty bodkin, or if you have an embroidery needle, anything that you can use to go through the casing. And we are going to put them through opposites. So this one will come around like so. Oh, wrong way. One of the nice things about having finished this off, that typically a lot of bags are done with just turning the edges in, and you end up like catching those little bits. And because this is all finished off, it's nice and clean and really easy to pull it through. So I have this one on this side. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. All right. All right, so I have to start here where you see this. So you get the opposite. This is where it curves and comes around. So I'm starting on that end so that I'll get a curve on this end with the other ribbon. All right, so I have my ends on both sides. To make your little knot, in this particular case, I'm going to take one end. I'm going to fold it like so, stack it one more time, and then before I complete it, I'm going to take this raw end and I'm going to hide it in my stack. Like so. So now you've got your little stack of ribbon and you've inserted the other raw end into it. And we're going to take our needle and thread. And I'm just going to do a small running stitch to gather it up, going through all my layers. Make sure you catch that raw edge as well, because that's how we're going to bury that raw end. All right, so I've gathered it up. You're going to take your thread and wrap it around just a couple of times to secure it, keep it tight. And then you can take your needle and run it through once or twice. Tie it off. I always tie off by just making a loop and going through the loop. You now have a little finished end, which is really very pretty. We'll do the same for the other side. And there you have it. We have a finished bag with pretty little bows at the end. And as I said before, you've got a beautiful work bag or gift bag or whatever you choose. Hope you enjoyed this. If you like what you see, be sure to like us and be sure to subscribe so you know whenever we put up new content. Thanks for sewing with me and happy sewing. Bye.